Hi, Dave. Welcome to Duologue.
Great to be with you. Thank you for having me.
In the context of UK, even in the context of Brexit, why do you think that the future of multinational institutions like UN, NATO, WHO, what do you think their role is going to be? Are they going to be more or less relevant?
I think they are going to be very relevant, but I think they vary in how well they're responding to the challenges of the age. I think if we take the terrible pandemic that we've had, there clearly were failings in the WHO. Now, some of those are being addressed, but if you ask me honestly, I would say for the future, yes, we should do our best to reform the WHO, but there might be things we need to do as well that we can do faster. We need to have better early warning systems about future pandemics. And I think that's something we can probably do alongside the WHO. That's something countries can come together and do, because if we try to do everything by reforming the WHO, I feel we'll be sitting around and discussing that reform and not actually getting what's done.
As far as WHO is concerned, as far as I remember, during this COVID pandemic time, I always got a feeling that they themselves don't know. And yet they were coming up with directions, guidance from time to time, and often self-contradicting themselves. Like, I think I read somewhere in the beginning, they said, don't wear masks.
Yeah.
Then they said, mask is mandatory. So in the WHO context or any other context, I personally feel that you may not need to know everything, right? Nobody, no institution, but it's most risky when you don't know, yet you try and be convincing as somebody who knows. That's where WHO needs some intervention.
Well, I think they did what they could in very difficult circumstances, but we can definitely now look at what happened and learn from the weaknesses. And I would argue one of the key weaknesses is that we need to make sure we are sequencing the genomes of these emerging viruses and pathogens much more quickly and sharing that information much more rapidly. And I think there are examples of institutions like the Global Alliance on Vaccines and Immunization, Gavi, which have grown up outside the formal structures of the UN and the WHO. And I think we could have some organization like that for pandemic preparedness, where scientific institutions in every country around the world are doing this research, are sharing that information, so we know what's coming faster. And take it out of politics. You have to keep these things, the science needs to be transparent, needs to be clearly shared, and we don't want to get bound up in organizations being embarrassed. They don't want to embarrass the Chinese, or they don't want to embarrass the Africans, or they don't want to embarrass the British. We don't need that. We just need the information. We need it in the most timely manner possible. And when I was Prime Minister, we had the Ebola epidemic in Africa. And again, on that occasion, the WHO was too slow. And so I think we've had two examples of where we need to have a non-political organization, science-based, shared between countries, telling us the latest information.
So will that happen under the gamut of WHO if you have to decide, or do you think there are independent bodies should come up with bilateral relationship, or maybe a collection of countries should come up with something which is, when you don't know things, you need to exchange your notes.
Yes, exactly. I hope that the G20 can give this impetus. They've discussed it, but it needs to be followed through. I think you can combine it with the new pandemic treaty, the global health treaty that's been discussed, which can address some other issues. But I think really what's important is having this institution in place so that pathogens are being sequenced, everyone's getting the information, and we react faster in future. Because I think one of the failings in the past was countries were too embarrassed to tell the WHO about bad things that were happening, and the WHO was too embarrassed to tell the rest of the world about what was happening because they didn't want to upset certain people. And so you get a delay in the system, a bureaucracy in the system, which we don't need.
The first part is, justifiable. I mean, if something is going wrong, we didn't get to know about the COVID thing in China till the time it broke out of proportion.
That's my point. And the same with Ebola in West Africa, where there was a sense of the countries didn't want to admit to problems fast enough. But if you have an independent organization with Centers for Disease Control and scientific organizations in every country in the world sharing in real time that data and making sure the rich countries are helping the poorer countries to have the technology they need for genome sequencing and everything else, That, I think, could make the world safer. So sometimes these institutions are capable of reform. I think NATO as an organization is actually performing well, particularly with the challenge that has come from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Some organizations we should try to improve, but we should recognize we may need to go above and beyond them.
Duologue with Barun Das, featuring David Cameron. Streaming on the world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.